And we begin. Warm welcome, everyone. We're so happy that you can join us today. My name is Tara Collins, and I'm the project director for the International and Canadian Child Rights Partnership, the ICCRP, and I'm a professor in child and youth care at Toronto Metropolitan University and also honorary professor at Children's Institute at the University of Cape Town. Kindly note we are recording today's event so that we can share this wonderful dialogue with those who cannot be here today. We kindly request that you keep your cameras off unless you're speaking to allow for better sound quality. We would like to begin by recognizing that we are all connecting from different places around the world today, and we would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of these lands who are the original peoples. We express a great debt to these peoples and the lands where we all live and work, and we are also very grateful to the older and younger generations that follow us. Over to you, Sachi.
Thank you, Tara. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our roundtable today. My name is Sachi Shukul, and I am the Child and Youth Participant Coordinator for the IAC and the ICCRP. I do also want to give a few reminders for our lovely event today. This webinar is going to be offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And with this, we offer real-time closed captioning, which will be available for all attendees throughout this event. The translation provided through this platform is not perfect, but it does work pretty well. I'm going to go through a few of our technical reminders just so people have the ability to access their translation and are aware of how to switch languages, change display names, and things like that. So participants should turn on closed captioning through the Zoom platform by clicking on the closed captioning or show captions dialog box that should be accessible on the bottom panel of your Zoom screen. So I'll give everyone a couple of seconds to navigate that. You can choose your preferred language for the translated text in this closed captioning box as well. We would like to request that all attendees also change their display name to reflect their name, preferred pronouns, and preferred language. You can do this by clicking your profile picture and pressing Change Display Name or Rename. For today's agenda, the first part of our roundtable is going to highlight our Intergenerational Advisory Committee panelists, who will speak for about 6 minutes each about their perspective on today's roundtable theme. There will also be a brief opportunity for questions of clarification from our panelists. Then there will be dialogue and discussion. It's important to ensure that there is enough time for this part of our event today after each panelist presentation. As time permits, you can either use the chat box or choose to unmute your microphone and verbally contribute to the event today. In order to maximize the opportunity for everyone to participate today, please keep your questions and comments to a maximum of 2 minutes to ensure that there is a variety of contributions and that everybody who wishes to participate does have enough time to do so. To ask a question of our panelists verbally, participants are asked to use the raise hand button or type in the chat if they desire to contribute, and identify their spoken language on the bottom of their screen before speaking, so that us as facilitators can ensure that the spoken language is correct when they choose to speak. We are very excited about our roundtable today. Our contributors, our attendees, we've all worked very hard on the back end. I know our panelist speakers are also very excited about the event today. So we do hope you enjoy our event, and we hope that it is a very fruitful and wealthy conversation. Thank you, everyone. I'll pass it back to you, Tara.
Hello, everyone, again. Today, we are gathering at this virtual roundtable to discuss the following topic: equity, diversity, and inclusion, EDI. What does this mean across contexts for children's rights? The ICCRP includes intergenerational participation from around the world, and we recognize that there are numerous terms used to discuss children's rights and children and young people that are informed by culture and context. However, for the purposes of this webinar, we understand children and youth as all those under the age of 18 in accordance with Article 1 of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is who we are talking about when we talk about children and youth. Now I turn it over to the wonderful Kwakhanya from South Africa and Robert, who is Ugandan, based in South Africa, who are our valued IAC members, to formally welcome you and introduce our panelists. Over to you, Kwakhanya and Robert.
Thank you very much, Tara. A very good day, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Robert Nanima. I'm a member of the ICCRP Intergenerational Advisory Committee from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm also an associate professor at the University of the Western Cape, and I also serve as a member of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. It's great to have you here, and I hope that you will have a great time with us over the next 90 minutes. Before we continue, I'll give an opportunity to my colleague Kwakhanya to introduce herself and give us a few insights. Over to you, Kwakhanya.
Hi everyone, I'm Kwakhanya from South Africa, Johannesburg, South Africa, and I'm a young member of the ICCRP Intergenerational Advisory Committee from South Africa. I will share a few insights on the ICCRP and what the IAC is. What is the ICCRP? The ICCRP is the International and Canadian Children's Rights Partnership. It is an international network, research network that focuses on children's rights. Its goal is to further the implementation of children's rights in research, policy, and practice. The ICCRP has relationships across the world between people of different generations. For more information, please visit our website. What is the IAC? In addition, we have the Intergenerational Advisory Committee. The IAC shares knowledge, advice, and recommendations to guide the ICCRP and inform how we can support intergenerational partnerships and the implementation of children's rights. One of its activities is the convening of virtual roundtables to foster intergenerational global dialogues on different topics to further children's rights, understanding, and implementation. The IAC includes 8 adults and 14 young people from ICCRP case study research and partner organizations who are Canadian and international. Over to you, Robert.
Robert, over to you. Kwakhanya, maybe you can continue a little bit because it looks like Robert's Wi-Fi has frozen. Hopefully we'll get him back.
Absolutely, I can continue. So today we're going to be discussing why the roundtables this topic today. Today's roundtable discussion is extremely interesting. It delves into 3 concepts that are important to the child rights discourse. These are equity, diversity, and inclusion, EDI. The critical question is, what do they mean across contexts for children's rights? Equity, diversion, and inclusion are essential principles in promoting children's rights across diverse contexts. Equity ensures that all children have fair access to resources and opportunities, addressing systematic barriers and biases. Diversity acknowledges and values the unique experiences, backgrounds, and identities of children, especially those from marginalized groups. Inclusion nurtures environments where all children feel respected, supported, and empowered to engage and thrive. In the area of children's rights, EDI principles are effectively tackle issues such as discrimination, unequal access to education and healthcare, and social exclusion, ultimately fostering more just and equitable outcomes for all children. They also deal with the 4 child rights-based principles of non-discrimination, best interest, right to life, and survival and development, and consideration of views of children. Now we turn over to our panelists. There are a total of 5 panelists to speak for 6 minutes each, which equals to 30 minutes. These panelists are IAC young people and older members. Today, our panelists represent a greater number of young people than adults, 2 to 3, to emphasize the opportunity for the IAC young people to share their ideas with representation from the areas known as the Global South and the Global North. different languages and various gender identities. Other IAC members are contributing by welcoming the attendees. Sorry. Closing our session and acting as participants. We have Lalita. She's an IAC young person from South Africa. Benyam is an IAC adult from South Africa. Sama is an IAC young person from New Brunswick, Canada. Vicky is an IAC adult from Scotland. And Tando is a IAC young person from South Africa. As a reminder, you will all have a brief opportunity to speak for 6 minutes to clarify anything the panelists have offered after speaking. Then we will turn to the discussion part of our event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kwakhanya. It's a shame we'd lost Robert, but hopefully he'll be able to rejoin. So we'll now pass it to the panelists who will be responding to a total of 2 questions each in the order below. So for all panelists, they are considering the question of what recommendations do you have to support intergenerational spaces focused on EDI? And then the IAC adults will address how can adults effectively listen to young people so they can impact EDI and child rights inspired decision making and processes. And then the child and youth panelists will also consider how can children and young people feel supported to have discussions around children's rights and EDI. Why is child and youth participation important on this theme? Thank you so much. Over to Lalita.
Good day, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Over to you. Great.
Okay, so good day, everyone. My name is Lilita Kopolo, and I am representing the Western Cape Commissioner for Children's Office in South Africa, Cape Town. Firstly, I would like to talk about diversity. Diversity to me means being different, and I think in the Western Cape Commissioner for Children's Office, we are all different. We come from different backgrounds, we have different beliefs, different sexualities, and some of us are differently abled. But we have one thing in common. We all have a passion for the rights of children. In the office, I've learned that yes, we may be different, but that doesn't mean that what I have to say and what you have to say should not be listened to. One of our child government monitors in the office is differently abled, and we always make sure to include him in every single thing, ensuring that every place we go to is wheelchair friendly and that he feels included in everything. We have child government monitors from the Dominican School of the Deaf who participate in our submission processes to government and interact with us on our weekly Wednesday sessions on WhatsApp. We even had an in-person meeting where they taught us South African Sign Language and we learned how to interact with them. We had an interpreter in the meeting so that they could understand what we're saying and we could understand what they were signing. We told them what we do in the office and how we work, etc. We had a lot of fun and we didn't let communication barriers get in the way. With our different beliefs, we are always respectful towards each other and mindful of what we say towards each other, as you might say something hurtful towards someone. Having diverse backgrounds in the office helps us understand the different perspectives that everyone has. We all have different lived realities and experience different things, and during our sessions, having those different perspectives is crucial because it helps us see things from a different perspective and get a glimpse of what we each go through and see every single day. In this, I think that in the office, we create an environment where everyone can participate and feel included, whether it's in fun activities or discussing important child rights issues that we face in our respective communities. Moving on to equality, I believe it means being equal and everyone being treated the same. I think that in the years that I've been part of the office, I've seen the amount of respect and care that everyone has in the office for each other, from the staff to the parents and the child government monitors. From a young age, we are taught to respect our elders and not call them by their first name. And when I came into the office, I had the same mentality. I remember meeting Tina and I remember calling her ma'am. She told me that she's not a ma'am, she's Tina, just Tina. And I think from that moment, it just shifts your perspective because that breaks down the barriers that we have, the different barriers, like the different level barriers. We, including the staff, they also told us the same thing. Don't call us sir or ma'am, but call us by our names. And to me, that just showed me how we are all equal. Yes, you may be older than me, but that does not mean with opportunities to represent in the office. I think we are all given equal opportunities to share our voice, whether it's speaking in parliament, speaking in front of government officials, traveling nationally or internationally, going to the office and meeting different child rights organizations. Everyone is always given the exact same opportunity to share or to be a part of that, and everyone is always treated equally. In addition to diversity and equality, we have inclusion. And inclusion to me means participation. And in the Western Cape Commissioner for Children's Office, we have 4 child participation models. We have child government monitors who are children under the age of 18, community child rights workshops, where the commissioner goes to different areas and communities in the Western Cape, whether it's urban or rural, and she conducts workshops for children that involve drawing, how they view their community, whether it's safe, whether it's dangerous, and how they feel about it. The commissioner does fun, interactive activities that children enjoy while still learning about the information they share. By doing community child rights workshops, the office she goes to the government and says, this is what the children said, and this is what they recommend and want. Often, children do go back to her and tell her whether the government did what they asked or recommended. The third child participation model is child consultations, where she communicates with children, whether it's via RCLs or going to the children's schools. The fourth child participation model is government budget and advocacy, where children are taught to read the budget books and understand the words in it. With this information, we can listen to budget speeches and understand a little of what's mentioned. This helps us as children make recommendations to the government to align government budgets in a child rights approach. Because at the end of the day, years 12 to 15 of us understand a bit of what's going on, but we have a lot of children in the province who basically understand nothing of what's being said in those books or during those speeches. Furthermore, with all these initiatives, we have created posters in the office just on budget speeches. And I think that's a form of inclusion. Not only are we giving recommendations to the government in our province, but we are also making an impact and being listened to. And slowly but surely, we are seeing a progress. For example, last year, we spoke to National Treasury and they worked with us to create a cool kids guide to the budget. As well as the budget speech at the end of last year, we were sent a Jersey version of the speech. We even created a budget story in 4 different languages, 4 different South African languages, Afrikaans, isiXhosa, and South African Sign Language. The reason I spoke specifically about our office is that it's my perspective on children's rights in diversity and inclusion. It's my lived reality, and I think it's essential to share it so that we can see what different organizations are doing and learning from each other. In conclusion, I think it's important to foster equality, diversity, and inclusion in terms of child rights. As I've mentioned, this helps promote the rights of children and gives them a space to be comfortable and free. Thank you so much for everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Lolita, for the great contribution. Now we have our next speaker, who is Benyam, an adult originally from Ethiopia, now based in South Africa. Over to you, Benyam.
Thank you very much to be connected here. And thank you very much for the opportunity that has been given to me to say a few words. What recommendations to provide to support well, for me, the starting point is the fact it's good to push the boundary and as much as possible create a more details, failing to create a world that is fit for all children. It's because of the fact that we have not been as inclusive as to be fair, or the emphasis on equity has been too limited. And in this, I want to make a specific point. A few years ago, says that we currently have the least trusting generation in the history of the world. So we need to ask ourselves, why do we actually have the least trusting generation in the history of the world? Because of fake news, because we haven't paid adequate attention to equity. Children who fall between the conflict settings are often neglected in the agenda. Children who are overrepresented in spaces of deprivation of liberty come from poor families, and so forth, so forth. So the best way, one of the best ways to address this gap and to actually consolidate the intergenerational spaces that we need to create is actually paying some emphasis on fairness, which is equity, on respect, which is diversity, and of course being as inclusive as possible. Let me pause.
So sorry, Benyam, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can. Thank goodness.
Okay, good. Should I continue to the second question?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. And I have 3 minutes, so I'll use that. Now, the second question is, how can adults effectively listen to young people so that they can impact EDI and child rights-inspired decision-making? The first starting point that we need to argue the case for a value add. We shouldn't start from the assumption that everybody understands this. Everybody sees why a focus on child rights-inspired decision-making, which takes into account inclusion and fairness and so forth, are absolutely critical. First of all, we should not make the assumption. We should be able out there to make the case. The second is we should be able to make the case on the basis of rights. That's critical. The third part is not just only on the basis of rights that we should actually make it. In some instances, we should also make the case of how it promotes social contracts, even initial point of view. So those arguments need to be made clearly as possible. When we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, one of the limitations that we see as we thought it would be, and equity is not being achieved as much as we would like it to be achieved. So to make the argument not just only on the basis of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, but also on the basis of the Sustainable Development Goals, national development goals that have been developed at the national level, it's important to make the case that the world that we want to create, the goals that we want to achieve, and the inclusive environment that we want to live in are actually significantly dependent on making sure that child rights-inspired decision-makings and processes are informed by equity, fairness, and so forth. I just want to make a very brief. Every time when I see a parliamentary debate where parliamentarians are fighting on YouTube and so forth, One of the things that actually comes to my mind is how we sometimes, as adults, are not communicating the right messages about fairness, inclusion, and so forth. Because adults who actually value those issues wouldn't engage in a physical fight in the middle of a parliament. So as adults, we have to be able to lead by example. And one way is, as I mentioned, to make sure that we value these principles and we actually include children's participation in this decision-making processes. Let me stop here.
Thank you so much, Benyam, for your great contribution. And now, next speaker is Sama, one of our IAC Young members from Canada. Over to you, Sama.
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be with all of you here today. And truly, it's an amazing opportunity to be surrounded by all of you. And I'm very excited to delve into equity, diversity, inclusion, or EDI, and what it truly means for children's rights everywhere. So the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child tells us that all kids are born free and equal. But achieving this requires more than just universal declarations. And that's where EDI comes in, acting as our beautiful roadmap. Equity isn't about treating every child exactly the same. It's about seeing where kids actually start and providing tailored support so every child feels included. Diversity is celebrating the incredible differences of who children are, their race, their language, their abilities, their families, and much more, ensuring every child sees themselves valued and represented. And inclusion, that's active magic, making sure every child feels like they genuinely belong, they are safe, they are respected, and empowered to jump in and participate fully. Ultimately, applying EDI to children's rights isn't just some side ideal. It's the absolutely essential, practical way to make that promise of a universal reality, ensuring every child doesn't just survive, but truly thrive. And so to really grasp these ideas, let's look at them in action. For example, in education, EDI demands lesson plans that reflect different cultures, learning tools that work for all abilities, and training teachers to break down their biases and to be trained to combat bullying. And in healthcare, it means giving care that respects cultural backgrounds, providing language supports, and actively tackling health differences that hit certain groups of kids harder. Even in our justice system, EDI means treating children fairly, no matter their background, making sure their voices are heard, and setting up programs that get to the root of problems instead of just punishing vulnerable youth. These are the real-world steps to making children's rights a reality for every single child. And let's look at EDI globally. So in global and humanitarian settings, EDI becomes a lifeline for children whose rights are often most at risk. In conflict zones, for example, refugee camps or areas impacted by natural disasters, access to food, education, and safety isn't equally distributed. Girls, for example, may be pulled from school during crises, while children from minority, ethnic, or religious groups may be excluded from aid entirely. Equity demands that responses consider these imbalances and prioritize those that are most vulnerable. Diversity means acknowledging that children's experiences of crises vary greatly based on their ethnicity and identity. And inclusion requires that all voices, even the quietest, are part of the conversation. When humanitarian responses lack an EDI lens, they risk reinforcing the very inequalities they aim to solve. Upholding children's rights globally means designing solutions that are not only effective, but also just and inclusive. Now, this journey full of EDI, it's ongoing and it's often challenging and difficult. It calls for us to be alert for the hidden biases and to push past resistance to change, to push past the status quo. It's not just about noticing our differences, but actively cheering them on, building environments where all children's unique talents are seen as absolute strength. And so the question for how can children and young people feel supported to have discussions around children's rights in EDI, and why are child and youth perspectives important on this theme? So child and youth perspectives are crucially important because we are at stages in life where EDI is significant in shaping our perception, interactions, and simply our upbringing. Involving them in these discussions not only offers a sense of responsibility and awareness, but also prepares youth to become more aligned with the principles of EDI and become more diverse, open-minded, and inclusive leaders in the future. To truly make these spaces flourish for EDI, we need to actively foster environments where everyone feels safe to share their thoughts, experiences, and insights on what equity, diversity, and inclusion mean to them. No judgment, just open hearts. We need these spaces to celebrate the incredible differences of our diversity through inclusive workshops, engaging dialogues, or simply joyful events where every single person feels genuinely heard and can contribute to anything. Importantly, we must put tools and real opportunities into the hands of our youth, empowering them to find and use their voices, not just for today's discussion, but to become truly mobilized, empathetic leaders. So let's remember, achieving true EDI for children isn't just the work of governments or institutions or organizations. It's a shared responsibility for all of us. Every choice we make, every conversation we have, every policy we support contributes to building a world where every child, no matter their story, feels valued, feels that they belong, and has every opportunity to shine. Thank you all.
Thank you so very much, Sema, for your great contribution. Now we're going to turn to Vicky, who is an adult member from Scotland, and we're happy the technical issues have been resolved. Over to you, Vicky.
Hi, Sama. That was such an amazing talk, and it's hard to follow it. I think you covered so many important issues. So I'm going to try and pick up on a few things about equity, diversity, and inclusion and give a couple of examples from my perspective. So I think, as you say, we need to take into account real world complexities, all these landscapes of change. We need to understand children and young people's lived experiences, but they're really from diverse, different children and young people, and they have intersecting inequalities. And we need to really understand intergenerational as well as peer dynamics and see how these support and challenge us in what we're trying to do. So I'm going to start with equity. So addressing some of these structural inequalities, these systemic barriers like poverty, colonial legacies, gender-based discrimination, and indeed adultism, just the way that adults feel we were all young once and assume that people know what children want and need. But we grew up in different times, in different places. So we need these adaptive transformational processes that really involve children and young people and adults. We need adults to change their perspectives as well and to reallocate resources and have community-based but inclusive of children. So these research and interventions which really build trust within communities. So I'll give the example for this one. In Scotland, we worked with a partner called Merkinch Partnership, and we were really trying to understand services post-COVID recovery. And it really was highlighted to us by the children that they had really been forgotten. In fact, some of them said they were raging. They were really distressed by the fact they were meant to do assignments online when they didn't have access to enough data. there were many issues where children and young people had been forgotten, but the services had been focusing on older people. So we really learned a lot about that, and it fed into our partners' strategies post-COVID. So diversity. So really valuing the differences amongst children and young people, and understanding that we have to have different creative methods to enable these very diverse voices and perspectives to be heard. I developed something called a Changescape, which is how do we support children and young people's agency to actually take action? How can we support children and young people not just to be affected by political, social, environmental context, but to actually change them with us? We need the ideas of children and young people. Now, in Ethiopia and Nepal, I work with inspirational young people who actually, in Ethiopia, they got together and actually worked with young people living with disability and worked with the Ministry of Youth to actually start to change policy. In Nepal, they raised issues specifically about girls and non-binary young people and took that not only to national government, but regional government. Young people with support can really make changes which can help us to reach better futures for everyone, actually. So, inclusion. So we need to understand how children and young people and their ideas can really lead to action. So that means not just trying to get the voices of different young people, but to actually hear them. And that means, as you say, Sama, to actually have processes which involve dialogue and also these empowering spaces, both for peers, so that children can and young people can work together to then express their views to adults and to decision makers, policy makers. And we really need these perspectives to shape our futures, because actually a lot of us feel we haven't done very well in the light of climate change, biodiversity crises, situations of conflict. We actually need children and young people, and we need them to help us to move towards more just futures. There was a young peer educator, I'll just finish on this, in Nepal, who said there are lots of social and cultural norms, and as young people, we don't want to change them completely, but let's look at taking the good bits and help adults to edit them, because we need change. And some of these cultural and social norms are moving very slowly, and we need the inspiration of children and young people to actually help us to get to more sustainable futures. So I'm really delighted to be invited to work with this intergenerational group. I believe in intergenerational justice, so learning from the past for future generations, but actually including current generations. We really need to do that. So thank you very much. And I'm going to hand on to Thando, who is one of the young people from South Africa. So I think, Thando, if you're here, I'm handing over.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, great.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky, for handing over to me. My name is Thandolwe Nkosi. I am one of the representatives from South Africa, and I'm representing the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. Thank you to the ICCRP for inviting me to be a panelist to this amazing roundtable discussion. And to answer the first question on the recommendations that I have to support intergenerational spaces focused on EDI, While the other panelists have already touched base on the few recommendations that I already had, I would like to re-emphasize them. I believe that one of the recommendations that is really needed to support intergenerational spaces focused on EDI is creation of mentorship programs that connect children and young people with adult professionals to create an opportunity for knowledge transfer. This is essential so that we as young people can also learn from our adult people, and adult people can also learn from us. And I believe that what holds young people back from flourishing in these spaces is not being aware of the spaces that are available to young people. Generations have different ways of thinking and of communicating and of expressing their views, and this often results in misunderstandings. So to maybe minimize this, we can also, it works with creation of mentorship programs, because you get to ask an adult person or a young person that, hey, what did you mean when you said this? Instead of us always meeting virtually. Oh, yes, virtual spaces are also recommended, but let us also prioritize physical interactions as well. Another recommendation that I have is to create or develop or revise current policies into ones that are child-friendly, policies that can be read, understood, implemented, or challenged by a child at an age as little as 9 years old, so that we can be able, as much as here in South Africa, in Cape Town, we have already started developing those policies that are child-friendly and child understandable. It is also important to also implement this practice in other countries as well, because in as much as children are important, they're not important into just one area, but they're important in all diasporas. Another recommendation that I have is to support in order for us to support intergenerational spaces, it is important to respect each and every strength that each party gives. Young people bring new perspectives, while older people or adult people bring wisdom and resources and networks. So it is important that we respect each other while in the spaces, so that we can be able to generate and actually fulfill the objective of us having these spaces. And this brings me to my next recommendation, which I believe is the backbone of effective intergenerational spaces. And this is intentional work. There can't be any results into what we bring onto the table without us being intentional about it. We need to be intentional in discussing. We also need to be intentional in implementing what we've discussed as well. And to answer the second question on how can children and young people feel supported to have these discussions around children's rights and EDI, I believe that active listening plays a huge role. This essentially means that as an adult, you are listening to a young person to understand where they are coming from, instead of listening to just answer. This helps bring perspective to listener and inclusion to the speaker. As a young person who has had multiple conversations with adults around the topic of children's rights and EDI, I have noticed that children and young people are not being given grace and patience. Instead, as young people, we are faced with judgment and premeditated assumptions. Before I even utter a word to an adult, I may get a sense from facial expression and body language that they've already assumed what I'm going to say. To feel supported, I request that young people be given patience and grace. It takes a handful of strength and bravery for a young person to speak boldly about issues surrounding children's rights and EDI. Another way I believe is that is through documentation and follow-up. So documentation is important because it ensures consistency and support. It also helps build upon past works, which reduces duplicated efforts. So whatever that we've tried in the past will not be effective anymore through the documentation that I may have with a young person, through an interaction that I may have with a young person. And the follow-up, on the other hand, it helps track progress and create a system where individuals, both young people and adult people, are held accountable for commitments. So in order for us to also create sustainable work, we need to be held accountable to our commitments, and that accountability comes at a cost of you being dedicated and intentional as well. A follow-up also shows respect that an adult person, for example, truly values young people's time and input. When you're calling or when you're sending an email to a young person, it will make me feel appreciated, that you really appreciated the time that you had with me, and you really appreciated hearing my views and my perspectives instead of just brushing them off or I don't know, forgetting that I even had a conversation with you. And why are these why are children and youth perspectives important to this theme? Is because our perspectives are important because they address subtle biases and inequalities. They also highlight areas that need systematic change. We are the ones who will inherit the world that we are building. So in order for generational impact to be implemented, we need to be part of the solution. We also need to be part of the implementation through discussions that we've had, through focus areas and task groups that have been created to discuss these issues. Thank you so much once again for the opportunity, and I really enjoyed spending time with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thando, for ending our panelist section in such a beautiful and inspiring way. I also want to thank our lovely panelists for such an awesome discussion and all of the amazing contributions. I know many of our attendees truly enjoyed that, and they appreciate your time, effort, and perspectives on such an important topic in relation to children's rights and intergenerational spaces. So I do want to say a big thank you to everyone and all of our speakers. We are also going to spend a couple of minutes now to open up the floor to our valued attendees. We're going to have about 5 minutes for any questions that require clarification from our panelists. For example, have you heard something a panelist has said and you want to clarify what that means in their context? Have you heard a word that you want to clarify and what that means and what their perspective is before we move on to the actual discussion section? We do encourage you to type in the chat, or if you require to be unmuted, if you want to verbally contribute, that is also very much encouraged. Just a reminder that when you do speak, please wait a moment to allow for the language to be changed to your spoken language if needed, and also please speak slowly. You are more than welcome to type in the chat or use the Q&A function that Zoom does provide, just to make things easier and to allow for a number of attendees to share their questions for clarification. So we are going to spend a couple of minutes now, approximately 5, if anybody does want to clarify anything from any of our 5 panelist speakers. So we will open the floor up now, and you can type in the chat, request to be unmuted, or use the Q&A function. And panelist speakers, amazing job. If you do see that a question is addressed to you, please feel free to address it, clarify any thing that you want to for the audience before we move on to our discussion section, which is very exciting. So we can give it a couple of minutes. I don't see anything yet. In case anyone is typing out the question, we will give it a little bit more time. Okay, so I don't see anything in the chat, so I think we are good to go. This means we do have a couple extra minutes on top of our already allocated time for our discussion section. So I am going to pass it on to Tara to bring that up and get us started.
Thank you so much, Sachi. So now we're moving on to our discussion section where we ask you once again if any participant or panelist or attendee has any questions or comments that they would like to share. You could put them in the chat box or use the Q&A function. And the panelists are welcome to unmute their microphone if they would like. So any contributions now? Let's get the dialogue started amongst us all of these wonderful contributions that we've heard from everyone. So feel free. Oh, I think Robert, have you got a comment? Is that what I'm seeing? Feel free. Anyone who wants to unmute in the panel, feel free to share, or our opening folks. So.
Thank you, Tara. I thank you for the conversations that we have had. I've been having thoughts about this specific topic. What does it mean for children across the globe, but especially for children in Africa? We know that marginalization is in different spaces. It's not only because of the various the economic standing of the country, but the environments that the children find themselves in, whether these are peaceful environments or whether they're humanitarian crises, or there's a specific marginalization that affects these children, perhaps children with disabilities, or they do not have access to education, access to healthcare, aspects of social protection. So the aspect of equity comes in to help aid that balance. In terms of diversity, they need to recognize, and this is something that most of the panelists have spoken to, that because children are coming from different backgrounds, ethnicities, they need to listen to them, not only from the perspective of responding after they have spoken, but understanding what they are saying. There's a time a certain committee member of the Africa Children's Committee said, we have to go down to the level of children to be able to understand them. The aspect of inclusion, focusing on different environments in schools. There are schools in refugee communities, there are schools in spaces of humanitarian situations. How do we ensure that all those children benefit? Have we considered the fact that at times the best teachers for them, let's say if the child is from, the child has been affected by armed conflict, let's say is from, giving an example, Somalia or Libya or Uganda, that the persons who understand his language would be best placed to be able to teach, and that's a form of inclusion at a national level. But most importantly, that I think we need to have more intricate conversations to integrate EDI into our various policies, practices, and that I think the child rights monitoring bodies, the Committee on the Rights of the Child, the Africa Children's Committee, can promote adherence to EDI by streaming them into those core child rights principles such as non-discrimination, right, life, survival, and development, among others. I'll end with this. This is my personal reflection that let us use the same. Let us use our acronym ICCRP as one of the takeaways for today. I've coined this in terms of after listening to the various participants. For instance, if we are speaking about engaging aspects of DEI, from the place of identification of the marginalized children in the various spaces, and that becomes a critical element in terms of identifying them, whether from a subjective or objective approach. The place of C, classifying the subjects being the children, and that the children should benefit from the various initiatives that we are trying to put across. Categorizing the interventions that we are bringing across, that it's not a one shoe that fits it all, but it has to be on a case-by-case basis, are responding to the challenges by virtue of this specific child that has been classified and the specific interventions that have been identified. And finally, P, pluralism that embraces diversity and inclusion, or parity that embraces inclusion. So if we go away to that, let's not forget the ICCRP aspect of identification, categorization, classification, response, and pluralism or parity. It will speak volumes to the conversations that we have, and we hope that they see the end of the day. I'll use Benjamin's term that I usually like using, that we shall not only count our days, but we shall make our days count. Thank you very much.
I love that saying from Benjamin. It's such a good one. And Robert, thank you for a new definition of ICCRP. That is so helpful. So, folks, we've got John Lee, one of our IEC young members, who's here. Hi, John Lee, and good to see you. But just to flag, we have 3 questions that have come our way. So we'll ask John to make your comment or question, and then we'll do a couple of questions and turn to the subsequent ones just to make sure we get everyone's questions. So over to you, John.
I just have a question. I did speak with Alita because one of the questions is regarding one of the speech that she made, and she said it's okay if I do answer the questions. I just know if that's fine with you guys as well. So to first start with my comments, this is a topic that is really passionate for me. Like I love this topic. EDI is something that should be included everywhere, and it was just so interesting to like hear all the ideas and the recommendations that came out of it because personally, I do believe that these are not new things. These are things that even people in government do think about. It's just always the question of why is it not being implemented? What is stopping these things from being implemented? I think that should also be a focus point on why are these things being stopped? Because we are constantly talking about them. So many people are saying them. It's always in the out and the known, but things are never happening. It's always just being spoken about, spoken about. When will we get to the point where we actually start to implement these policies or the legislations or these programs or things like that? I know Tando did speak about how some of the programs are being started in Cape Town, which is wonderful. I think we can take away from that on how are they starting these things because they have process, they have progress that we can look at and reflect on. So that is just something interesting to look at. And then there was a question in one of the Q&As that spoke about calling people on their first names and how it may be affected by African culture and should African culture then be reset. This is something that we do speak about a lot of the times within our organization, and I would say yes, it's something that we are talking about to the Department of Social Development as well, Department of Agriculture, all of those different things. When you start calling people by titles or you add titles to things, there is a power dynamic that does take place. It is something that is very challenging, especially when you work with children. Power dynamics is something very terrifying. It frightens kids where they don't speak up. And a lot of the things that came out of this webinar was including children in decision-making processes. But how can we do that if you are constantly having that power dynamic of here's the child, here's an adult, and what brings that dynamic is a title of Mr., Mrs., whatever. Instead of just we are both, even though I am a child, I do acknowledge that that is an adult, I do acknowledge it, but we are also both human beings. As much as I have children's rights, I also have human rights, which we both have in common. So just to answer on that question, I do think, especially when it comes to cultural norms, things like that have to be like looked at with a magnifying glass almost because you don't want to offend anyone or disrespect anyone, but you need to bring a different point of view and different perspective of why is there that dynamic between adults and children. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, John Lee. And I see that Thando is keen to contribute here, which is great. And may I just say, after Thando, we'll turn to Kathy's great question in the chat. And the additional comments and questions are coming fast and furious, folks. So more to come. Over to you, Thando.
Thank you, Tara. I just wanted to answer Kathy's question and the one from the anonymous attendee. So just to counter the attack that comes with EDI, I think it's important for us to educate the public. There's nothing that beats awareness and education. Let us educate the public about EDI benefits and the greater idea behind EDI being beneficial for everyone and not just children in the society. And once we establish that, we are also establishing the why. Why are we discussing EDI? Why do we believe that EDI is important, not just in our local environments, but also at a greater and global environments as well? And I think to answer the question of would promoting EDI mean reconstructing cultural practices as well? I would say yes. I think it would mean reconstructing cultural practices, because if I think about it in another perspective, EDI also challenges ideas like patriarchy, and these are greatly influenced by cultural practices. So we cannot be tackling EDI from a children's rights perspective without tackling EDI on other perspectives that surround us as children, as African children, or as African people as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sando, for that great answer. And now I wonder if any other IAC member, the panelists or contributors in this session today, have anything else that they want to say to complement what Tando has said around what do young people and panelists suggest to counter the attack of EDI measures and policies in various countries. And then we also had Tando's excellent point around cultural factors. So how promoting EDI means reconstructing cultural practices as well. So we have one answer from Lolita, who's one of our panelists today, which I'll share, and then I'll turn to the panelists for anyone else. I see Vicky's interested. So Lolita has added to the Q&A to say, yes, I think at a young age, we are always taught this, and it's disrespectful to call an adult by their name. Even at school, it's the same thing. I think that just creates a barrier, making an older person seem more inferior and more important. Excellent and powerful words, Lolita. Did you want to say anything else? Otherwise, we'll turn to other IEC members. Okay, thank you so much for that helpful answer, Lolita. I think I saw Vicky. Was there any other IAC member who's interested in answering? I see Vicky and then followed by Benyam. Over to you.
Yeah, no, this is very interesting, and just trying to respond to what's in the chat as well. So I think Sama actually brought up the issue about dialogue. How do we actually get to the stage where people feel comfortable to talk to each other? And also, I think, Thando, you talked about assumptions. And I think it relates to I think it's, who's it, Sam in the chat has said about research. And I think, more and more we actually have to provide evidence for policymakers to take on board. And also we have to work with adults so that they can see how inspiring young people are. So sometimes there's what we call a buffet approach. You get people starting to see what children and young people can contribute to research, and having really rigorous processes so that we can document. I think also, Thando, you talked about documentation, or someone did, and documenting, what happens in young people's everyday lives, and what is the kind of action that they are taking, and what are the suggestions that they have, and then having some kind of format. And a lot of very creative research methods as well can help with this, where adults actually understand and have a chance to say their piece as well and be respected, and make some commitments to change. And I think the more that people can work in this sort of intergenerational way, the more that people can get over this adultism and some of the assumptions that they're making about children and young people, and actually value their input in a very meaningful way. So I think it is about those spaces, documentation, evidence, really sort of challenging those sort of the status quo, and sort of that we need new solutions, new ideas. And I think, Bill, you said these big issues, the big changes, we actually need new solutions. And I think those new solutions are often going to come from young people, as you can hear from their talks. They're very inspiring. So
Thank you so much, Vicky. That's helpful. And now we turn to Benyam, then John Lee, and then Kwakhanya, and then we'll turn to Bill and Sam's questions in a more targeted way with the rest of the panelists. Over to you, Benyam.
Thank you very much, Tara. I think these are very useful and interesting questions. Now, I just want to zoom in on one, which is a very important one that John Lee raised. Why don't states do it actually? Why do they shy away from these conversations? There are many reasons that they might provide. Maybe sometimes they're not convinced. Sometimes they don't know how to do it properly. Sometimes they think it's very costly. But one thing that comes out very clearly for me is that doing it often requires being courageous, being able to face the reality on the ground. What do I mean by this? Doing it basically means, if you want to look at equity, you want to look at inclusion and so forth, it means having the necessary data, as Vicky rightly said, the necessary evidence to take action. I'll give you an example. I'm connecting with you from Geneva. The Committee on the Rights of the Child is in session. And I apologize if the internet was not great. It's a building that has been around 100 years, and I changed the room so that you can hear me better. Now, we reviewed a number of countries, and there were conversations around equity, inclusion, and so forth throughout the conversations. We had a conversation with Iraq. The government said that they are establishing an interministerial committee to look at the extent to which education, both at the primary and secondary level, is inclusive, is promoting tolerance, which I think should be lauded. We had a conversation with Brazil, and they said that they've looked at the data and have identified how bullying, particularly cyberbullying, is targeted towards specific groups. For instance, Afro-Brazilians, for example. So that requires courage and forward-lookingness to actually make decisions on the basis of the data. We had a conversation with Qatar, for example, on migrants in Qatar, or children with disabilities that are falling between the cracks in the country. And again, on the basis of the data, you need to be as inclusive and you need to be as much as fair as possible. We had a conversation with Romania, for example, children whose parents actually travel abroad to work elsewhere, and how are they keeping up with their education and so forth. So the conversations that are informed by the data, that look at fairness, equity, and diversity, they bring about very tough truths that decision makers, politicians cannot ignore, should not ignore, and should be able to engage with. Let me mention one final thing. When we talk about fairness and inclusion, it's not just only between different categories of children. I mean, children with disabilities, for example, indigenous children and so forth. But it's also about between different countries. We saw it during COVID. The countries who lost the biggest are the ones who didn't have the resources, who didn't have the infrastructure. Online education was provided for some countries, and online education was not possible for many other countries. So we also need to look at it not just only from the very limited sense, but also from the broader sense about the world that we want to create is not just only for a group of countries in the north or the south or somewhere in the middle. It's actually for all 193 member states of the United Nations. And that requires a higher level of understanding of what inclusion and fairness and so forth actually entails. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Benyam, for that helpful contribution. John Lee and then Kwakhanya.
I'll just be answering two of the questions that I saw in the chat that really caught my eye by William and Sam. I'm going to start with William's question. You asked like, how are big political and economic changes affecting the world right now, affecting how we should do EDI? And I think big political and economic changes are making EDI work really more urgent and more important like right now. For example, like rising inequality, immigration, and social justice movements. They are shifting what communities need and expect from research and policies, right? These dynamics really do mean that EDI can't just be a side effort anymore, like be so for real. It needs to shape who's at the table, what questions get asked, and how outcomes are shared. We have to stay responsive and grounded in real world experiences. especially for those who are not the most impacted. I think that is a really important fact. And I think we mentioned it on a lot of people who were speaking now about the different countries, people who are impacted, who are not impacted, really focusing on those people. And then for Sam's question, which is a really long one, I would like to hear from the young people in regards to how they feel EDI should be incorporated in research efforts, as well as how equity compares to equality in this discussion and things we should be careful of as adults, which is a really important question. Thank you so much for asking it. Um, I think EDI should be included into research from the very beginning. Like when you even start thinking about your research, EDI should be considered. It can't just be an afterthought where after you've done your research plan or after you've, started interviewing people or whatever, then you think of EDI, oh my word, now it's important. It shouldn't be like that. From the very beginning, that should be incorporated. It is important that research teams reflect the diversity of the communities that they serve. That is also very important. Also, while equality focuses on giving everyone the same resources, equity ensures people should equity ensures that people get what they need to succeed. That is the difference. Instead of just the people that's around you, you're focusing on everyone else and what do they need because they also contribute to the conversation or to your research. Adults should be more careful not to assume that they fully understand young people's experiences. I think Tando and a lot of other panelists did speak about this, where adults assume they know a lot about children instead of sitting down, having conversations, having workshops, having those mentorship programs in place to truly understand a young person's experience and lived realities. And I think Lolita made a very good example of the organization that she works with in Cape Town, that they really focus on children's lived realities and their experiences. So we need to get involved in those type of questions and those type of answers. Like even if it's just a questionnaire that you're sending out to young people to answer, it's a type of feedback that you're getting back so that you are actually including young people in your research so you can have more accurate results and more accurate information that you're going to be giving out to your fellow adults and your fellow researchers and people. So I think that is very important to take a look at. Thank you so much, guys.
Amazing. Thanks. Great contribution. Quick.
Hi everyone. In terms of just touching on the question that John Lee wanted to answer just now and how EDI can be included in research. I think it's important that when research is being done, that it is inclusive and transparent. Because what tends to happen is the information we receive from research is very not necessarily biased, but very focused on very specific elements that don't cover other underlying factors and issues that could result in a lack of inequality and equity in certain spaces and environments. And with those underlying issues being overlooked and not necessarily exposed or discussed enough, it becomes very hard to actually reach tangible solutions to inequality and a lack of equity in certain spaces and environments. And so I think it's very important that when research is being done, that it is very transparent and very inclusive and open to every single aspect that could cause any form or shape of inequality or equity. And just to expand on that a little bit, is that I've been in a international school for the past 8 months, and I, going into it, had very high expectations of this image of a college where everyone is included, everyone is in a essentially a safe space where ideas can be discussed, where equality and equity are respected and upheld. And it's unfortunate to say that even though that is the goal of the college, there are many, many factors, many underlying factors that are not taken into consideration that do hinder this goal of having that equity and equality. And these are issues, like I said, that if we're not transparent enough, that we can overlook, and that can affect the day-to-day lives of the people around us. An example of this is in the college. Right now we're on our summer break, so I'm back in South Africa, and there are students who are not going home because of war, because of conflict and other things happening in their home countries, and who have to then make arrangements to either stay with friends or find host families in the country where the college is. And as much as the college does attempt to try and meet that inequality, a lot of the times they cannot. And it makes it very hard because there's a lack of transparency with other students in the college. And it almost becomes a form of shame that these students can't go home. And if the college was, just as an example, if the college was more transparent and open with these discussions, it would make it much easier for students who are able and in a position to help to actually be able to provide the solution for students who cannot go home to be able to visit and stay with friends and not have to struggle and have this fear of not being able to go home. This is just an example of how it is important that institutions and organizations, no matter how big or small, have to be very transparent of the various issues that can affect every single person in those institutions and organizations, because then becomes easier to then face those challenges and find those solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kwakhanya, for your contribution and highlighting that really important example of the importance of transparency or the lack thereof, and where children's and youth needs are not being identified or responded to in appropriate ways. That was very important. And I want to now call attention once again to Bill's question in the chat and then Sam's question in the chat, just to ensure that there are no other contributions from our wonderful panelists to offer to the conversation. So Bill has identified how are big political and economic changes affecting the world right now and how we should do EDI. And boy, oh boy, there's lots of changes in the world. Sam has, as has been pointed out and already responded to from John Lee, which was great, but we also want to know if there are any other contributions from the IAC young members as to how they feel EDI should be incorporated into research efforts and how equity compares to equality in this discussion and what we should be careful of as adults. So excellent questions from folks today. So thanks. I wonder if any of the IAC members have anything else they want to say around those particular questions. And now we have Sama back. Yeah, over to you. Sorry, Sama, you have to unmute your microphone.
Yes, sorry, I thought I unmuted my microphone, but I did not. So I would like to touch upon Sam's question about incorporating how EDI should be incorporated into research. And EDI can be incorporated in research by simply listening to experiences, listening to testimonials, and gathering stories from young people, from adults, from everybody who is basically under this umbrella of EDI. And to kind of move away a bit from the question, I would like to talk about the system and how the system is obsessed with preserving the status quo, and it's obsessed with preserving the general standards. And so, and that can be really harmful for students who want to suggest ideas and want to create initiatives that include EDI and such and such and such. And it's also specifically hard to be in a society where youth are often seen as teenagers or immature, and it's really hard to be seen seriously, and it's really hard for our voices to be heard and acknowledged. And I specifically have an example. I think 2 weeks ago, I met with this politician because I'm doing lots of work here in New Brunswick with the education system, and I'm meeting with lots of politicians. And I met with this particular politician to talk about an issue we were facing here in our education system. And I came in to talk stories, I came in to talk concerns and issues, and he came to talk statistics, numbers, and government budgets that I have no idea about. And at some point in the middle of this conversation with this politician, I thought it was pointless because there was no attempt to really hear what I had to say. There was only this attempt to say that the government needed to do this, and this is policy, and this is numbers, and this is statistics that I really had no idea about. And it's very hard. There's this power dynamic that really occurs when talking to an adult, when talking to a politician, when talking to somebody in charge, and it's intimidating. I felt really intimidated, and it's really hard for us as youth to go out of our comfort zone and to go to these institutions and to go to these people in charge to talk about our issues. And yeah, and our voice matters and our contributions matters, and we need to stay strong. We need to stay strong in a society that's always not going to be equitable. That's always not going to be inclusive. And we, as young people, as adults, we make it inclusive. We make it equitable. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Sama. Any other contributions from any other panelists on those two questions? Over to you, Vicki.
I think Sama's got it right exactly again. Fantastic. I think that often we need to train adults who are receiving information about the value of the information that they're getting and the different kinds of information, because we might be working very creatively. Stories are really, really important, and they are evidence. Maps, drawings, different forms of evidence. We have to show how we've collected that really rigorously, and that it's really important evidence alongside what they're expecting, which is statistics often. So I think we have to train the adults. I think we can use all kinds of, talking to a lot of people, gathering more stories, kind of coding some of our work. So we say the age and gender and situation of the young people we're working with. But most of all, we have to have training for adults to kind of unlearn some of these strange expectations of this is the only kind of evidence we can make decisions on. And we have to work together on that, I think. And I think we can do very rigorous research with children and young people, which is still creative and inspirational. So I think you got that very well worded, better than me. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Any final comments from any other IEC panelists in the last minute? And then we will be turning to the closing with Bill and John Lee. So John Lee, over to you.
This is just for Sama as well. I just want to give us some motivation, and it's for all the adults in the room as well. When you have an adult that really supports you, and I think Lady and I can really speak from experience, we have an adult who really stands by us, especially in these times when adults are trying to tear us down. I mean, a speaker of parliament literally asked me when I went to go speak to her about the Bella Bill, something really important. Shouldn't you be in school? I'm like, I'm talking about something really important here to you, and you're worried if I should be in school and not instead of talking to you. But I would have crashed out, I'm not gonna lie. I would have had a whole episode if I didn't have an adult who was there supporting me, guiding me, prepping me beforehand about how parliamentarians are, what are like the dynamics that they use, how are their mindsets, what do they expect. If I didn't have the preparation, I wouldn't be able to go in there and be like, I got this, skin is thick, no one can say anything to me. And I think that is also for all the adults in this room. I hope that you guys are those adults to other young people, to mentor them, guide them, help them, teach them that thick skin. Because as much as we want adults to change their perspectives, we as young people also want to learn how to deal with these type of adults, how to challenge these type of adults before we can get to that point. Because it's not going to come tomorrow. It's not going to come next week. It's not going to come next month. So it's a whole process. So to Sama, I really hope that you have the support that you need. And to all of the adults in the room, I really hope that you guys are that support that we need. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, John Lee. Over to the
I'll be very brief, Tara. Those were excellent contributions. I'm going to make my final remark based on the first point that I made. It's the 35th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. We have a lot to celebrate. but we have quite a lot to be concerned about. We shouldn't just only be measuring progress on the basis of what we have done in the last 35 years. We should be measuring maybe on the basis of what has happened in the last 5 years. And in the last 5 years, whether you talk about conflict, whether you talk about migration, whether you talk about the extent to which AI is also creating challenge, whether you talk about education. Before COVID, we used to talk about an education gap. After COVID, we're talking about an education gulf. So if anybody needs a very clear example about inclusion, that's a very practical example of what it is. So we shouldn't settle for the low-hanging fruits, whether we're doing research, advocacy, or law reform and so forth. And what inclusion and fairness requires is as much. So it's not the time to despair. It's actually the time. It's not the time to double down. It's the time to say, we get the circle bigger. We consolidate. We actually double up our efforts to see the kind of world that we want to see, that is inclusive, that is fair, and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We also want to give a big, big, big thank you to all of our speakers and all of our attendees. That was such an inspiring, beautiful, and wealthy conversation. I love the different perspectives, different lived experiences, and I also really appreciate that we got to hear from ICCRP and IAC perspectives, but also organizational perspectives, context-based specific perspectives. And I also do like that I saw some connection building in the chat. So please feel free. I know, Sama, you had someone reach out to you to ask for your contact information. That is amazing. That is what we love to see. We love that relationship building and connection building. So attendees, panelists, speakers, please feel free to connect with the different members. This is kind of how we start that beautiful pathway that we are all trying to build, and we're on this journey together. So it was very lovely to see that happening as well in the chat. I would like to now turn it over to our very valuable members, Bill and John Lee. We have John Lee calling in from South Africa, and we have Bill from the United States to formally close our roundtable event today with some brief comments as well as some reflections about today's discussion. So off to you, John Lee and Bill.
Do you mind if I start or? Okay, so I'll just be like reminding everyone some of the very valuable points that I took out of everyone's panel discussions. I noted down everyone's leader. Being different doesn't mean you shouldn't be listened to. We are all different. We have different lived experiences, and at all ages. Oh, and that we are all equal regardless of our ages. Sorry. Binyam, we need to push boundary and create a world that is fit for all children. Really love that one. Lead by example and value the importance of including children in decision-making processes. Very important as well. Sama had one of my favorite discussions in the chat. I really enjoyed it. She spoke about how every child doesn't just need to survive, but they need to thrive. I agree with that. And it doesn't matter where you come from, EDI should ensure that all children are treated fairly in all departments. Vicky, understand intergenerational relationships. We grew up in different times, in different places. Adults should really change their perspectives. Wink, wink. And thank you. I just want to thank Vicky for all the work that you've been doing with children, actually working with children. We really do appreciate it. And then Thanda, who ended us off, she said to create mentorship programs, acknowledge, so that we can transfer knowledge between adults and young people, and to respect everyone and to respect what they bring to the table. Everyone has something to offer. And the big message out of this entire session was that children should be heard, children should be listened to, and children should be included. Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Bill.
Bill, we just need
Oh,
you.
I think you're muted.
I came into this conversation kind of wondering, what would be like over time? How do you think about DEI over time as we all get older? World changes, we change with experience. And I didn't know what to think about that. Boy, did I get my answer today. Yeah. Sama just blew me away. She talked about shared responsibility for all of us. Quote, building a world for every child. Okay. Then Vicky steps in. She talks about shaping our future. Then Thando. How can you beat this? We are the ones who inherit the world. And then this goes on and on. Of course, it gets repeated over and over, John Lee comes back to this in the discussion and so forth, okay? And I noticed something going on. Also, that on one side, there was a wish to be safe, have these nice niches, we could have this conversation. On the other side, there was one want to get out there and change things. And I'm coming down on the latter side. I'm thinking that young people have got to get out and make their case. It's not going to be comfortable. And I think Vicky really came back and talked about this, a little bit, my implications, there's big changes going on out there. And I think that we can't be looking for comfortable ways to talk about DE&I. We need to talk about impact. Maybe that means more organization. Maybe that means young people getting out and putting messages out there, organized. I don't know. I don't have an answer to the how-tos. But maybe we need to be more forward, and thinking more about shaping our own futures. And I mean ours, young people helping shaping the futures, being my future too, as little as it is for everybody. So maybe it's think about participation. Maybe participation isn't something that old people give you. Maybe participation is something that young people take and do. And I just like to suggest that there's something else I see going on. And I've seen this other places too. I think you, young people, are calling us back to different values. I keep hearing you talk about values one way or another. You get people my age, they talk about technology and policy and stuff like that. And we had this nice little example, somebody talking to a policymaker. He wants to go and talk about this stuff like that. And I thought, that guy really misses the point, or he was afraid of facing the point. Maybe the point is we have to change our values. If that is it, then we really, really need young people out there calling our attention to that and raising a ruckus about it. So that's all I have to say. I just thought that was a wonderful discussion. I enjoyed every minute. I wanted to just be able to give you all hugs. I couldn't do it from afar, but I really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill and John Lee, for those very empowering words. And I agree with you, Bill. I wish I could give everyone a big virtual hug. Maybe we could do it virtually. But I think that was such a beautiful conversation, and everyone has worked so hard. And I love that it was just such a flow of rich dialogue. And much like you, I appreciated all of the beautiful words that everyone had to share. So a big thank you to all of our panelists, speakers, and attendees. None of these roundtables would be the same and as beautiful and inspiring without you all and your contributions. We do have a couple of more minutes, so as our event has now come to an end, we kindly ask that you take the next few minutes to answer the following few questions in the polls that have hopefully popped up on your screen. I know it's popped up on mine. And this is just to inform our efforts going forward and in terms of our ongoing participatory evaluation process. So as you do complete that, and now that our event has come to an end, please feel free to put some thoughts, emojis, expressions into the chat, share your gratitude for everyone being here. But thank you everyone so much for being part of our roundtable this time around. We hope to see you soon. And please feel free to stay connected to the ICCRP and all things with our wonderful Intergenerational Advisory Committee. Thank you so much, everyone. And it was lovely seeing you all again. Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists, speakers, facilitators, everybody in the background who has always been so supportive, adult support workers. I know Tara and myself show a lot of gratitude to all of you. This would not have been the same without all of us here. So thank you so much for making it a wonderful space as always.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Thank you so much, everybody. Take good care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye.